All right, everybody. We can go ahead and get started. Christian Clark, you can lead us off, please.
Hey, Griff, how you doing? Christian Clark here with Null.com. This compressed timeline that you guys have had to operate on, can you just give me some sense of what this has been like from the front office side of doing the draft and free agency and get ready for the start of training camp, all in about a 2-week span here?
Yeah, Christian, it's a great question. It's been it's been almost unimaginable in terms of the marathon of a sprint that it's been, if that's a thing. It feels very much like we've been on full alert and going full speed for longer than I ever have in my career. And at the same time, I feel really comfortable with where we've landed. And we're really excited with everything that we've been able to bring together. And Trajan and his staff on the front office side and Stan and his staff on the coaching side, we're super excited with how this has all come together, particularly on the floor. We had a very clear theme that we wanted to address coming out of the bubble. We talked about it a little bit before. We wanted to express a higher level of competitiveness as a group. We needed more grit and toughness and more of a defensive identity. And literally every move that we've made fits that theme. There is not a player that we brought in here that isn't about the things that we cared the most about. And everyone we're bringing in here on a human level is the types of people that we really wanted to represent us. And we wanted to represent our fans. So Christian, it's been crazy, but it's been a real blessing as well to get to be part of.
Hey, Griff, this is Fletcher Mackel from WDSU TV. Maybe just following up on that, on specifics, could you maybe just talk a little bit about Adams and Bledsoe? There were reports that Adams was a guy you had interest in last year. Had you tracked those guys for a long period of time, targeted them as guys you really wanted to get, or did it kind of come together maybe a little bit more spontaneously?
So it's funny, actually. It's quite often you hear stories about rumors of players that were wanted by a franchise or franchises trying to acquire players. And most of the time that's untrue. If that was ever said about myself and Steven Adams, it's absolutely true. From the time I had a first draft meeting with him, we had lunch together when he was a prospect in the draft. He's been a player that's been very much at the forefront of my mind in terms of representing what we want our work ethic to be, what we want a team ethos to really be about. Steven's as selfless a teammate and as ferocious as a competitor as there is in the league. And we talked about it today, actually, some of the staff. Steven has a switch that he flips when he walks between the lines, and he becomes a completely different person. And walks across those lines back into living his everyday life. He's as compassionate and as caring a human being as I've ever been with. So got a fascinating dynamic there, and something that we're really excited about having in a position, frankly, of leadership with our team. He's a vocal leader. He's somebody that is a native teacher of the game. He's somebody that's already been spending time with Willie Hernan-Gomez by way of example, trying to teach him some nuance that maybe Willie had never seen before. So we're excited about what Steven brings to us, both as a leader, as a playoff seasoned competitor, but mostly as a human being. Relative to Bled, I would say very similar things in terms of the playoff pedigree. He's been a very successful player. He's a two-way player that plays both ends with incredible zeal. He's a guy who, from a competitive standpoint, represents everything that we want to be about. He's just in love with the game of basketball, and he's somebody that every general manager he's been with will share. They just love the guy on a human level, and so that was meaningful to us. But everything he brings in terms of work ethic and approach to the game, again, that's the theme we were trying to bring to the table.
Hey, what's up, Griff? This is Will Guillory from The Athletic. Now that it's officially official, I guess, how important was it to lock down BI to a long-term deal? Just a big picture-wise for this franchise and the trajectory you're trying to, send this team on going forward.
Well, it just doesn't happen very often, Will, that somebody's 23 years old, they have the skill set that he has, and they're just barely scratching the surface of what they can be as a player. We talked about when we acquired Brandon in the beginning, he was something of a late bloomer. He has a body type that is really not filled out yet, and he's going to continue to do so. His work ethic, his work rate, his diligence to taking care of himself and doing the right things off the court is something that really spoke to us. But when we left the bubble, Brandon shared very plainly with Trajan and I, he doesn't intend the playoffs again in his career. And he was taking a position of leadership in this franchise. And that was very, very powerful for us in the form of a young player who represents all the things he does off the court. This is a guy who very quietly has been very compassionate, very involved in his community, giving to frontline workers in his hometown of Kinston, doing things here in New Orleans to feed the hungry. He's somebody that really represents the things that we care about. And his on the court talent is very clear and very evident. And he's just scratching the surface of who he can be. And I think the thing that might be most exciting from a basketball perspective is Brandon knows he's got a lot of room for improvement on the defensive side of the ball. And he really wanted to be pushed on that side of the ball. So I think the synergies that could exist between Brandon, the players that we've mentioned already, and Bled and Steven as leaders for our group are significant. But I also think the coachability of those three as our leaders really lend themselves to Coach Van Gundy and his staff, making the kind of impact they want to as well.
Griff, Scott Kushner from the Times-Picayune. Just real quick off the top, I know this isn't really your job, but have you been given any guidance at all with regards to the arena or fans or what you have? And does that affect you guys at all? And then I have one other question after that.
Thank you, Scott. I haven't actually been involved in any of those conversations or any of those negotiations with the mayor and her people, but I know that Dennis Lauscha and the business side are working on that, and hopefully we come to a resolution that allows us to have a decent number of our fans available, because I think this is a team that's really going to speak to them, and I think fans are really going to be proud of who this group is.
And then from just a basketball perspective, this investment in Brandon Ingram obviously speaks volumes. And then you've got Zion Williamson, who's very clearly a part of the future here. How do you think that combination, under an ideal circumstance, how do you think those two pair best? Where do you kind of see them on the floor together? How do you see them, complementing each other? What's kind of, if they're going to be a foundation of this franchise going forward, what aspect of that do you look forward to the most, I guess?
Frankly, I think the human beings that they are one. I mean, it was really meaningful to me. Brandon Ingram does not have a player option in his contract, and he didn't care about that. He wanted to commit himself to this organization for 5 years, and we committed ourselves to him by giving him the trade bonus should he be traded, because it's a sign of our commitment to him that we didn't sign him to use him as anything other than a leader of our franchise. And he didn't sign to be anything other than that leader. And so we're a family here, and it's what we wanted to be. And I think Brandon understood that very clearly. So I would tell you that what I see him doing in large measure is leading this group and helping Zion through sort of the growing pains he went through at the same stage in his career. This is not an easy sport to just flip the switch and be dominant in. And I think he has the ability to help Zion navigate some of the challenges he may face. But in terms of the pairing between the two of them, the thing that excites us the most is sort of what excites us about a lot of our roster. It's the versatility there and the positionless basketball we can play. Both Zion and BI have the ability to be ball dominant and make plays for other people. Bled can do the same. Steven Adams is a terrific passer and somebody who has the ability to make the right read. So we feel like that group, the hallmark of our group, is going to be that we share the ball at a really high level and we take extremely efficient shots. And because both Zion and Brandon can handle the ball in a pick and roll, they can work as a screener in a pick and roll, they can screen away and be used as cutters off the ball, and they're totally willing to do whatever needs to be done to win basketball games. Those are the types of players that if it works out and everybody stays healthy, they can be franchise caliber players on teams that advance rounds into the playoffs. And that's what we're trying to build from a sustainable success standpoint.
Hey, Griff, this is Jim Eichenoff for Pelicans.com. I was wondering the two players that were kind of officially added to the roster today, Hernan Gomez and Gabriel. What did you like about those guys, and what made you want to bring those guys in?
well, I feel silly. I'm going to be a little bit of a broken record, but those kids are absolutely ferocious competitors. They play the game the right way. They play the game to win. They both have incredible upside as players. They're both very young, but they've been about the right things. And Wenyen, by way of example, similar to BI, has a body type that's very late blooming. We feel like he's just figuring out exactly what he's going to be capable of, but he does it with a zeal and passion for the game that was significant. And we weren't going to bring in anybody that didn't embrace the game the way that he and Billy do. And we're really just very excited about both players, both in terms of what they bring from a toughness and grit standpoint, but what they bring in terms of their coachability and their selflessness as well.
Hi, David. This is Ollie Cosell with the Bird Rights. Last season, the hope was for the team to be able to hang their hat defensively. Obviously, with Zion and Derek missing a lot of time early, the execution of that vision was practically made impossible. But once the group did find their footing in mid-December and until the pandemic shutdown, Pelicans boasted a pretty good defense, top 10. So with the additions of Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams and hiring Stan Van Gundy, is there a similar expectation?
Yeah, I think we're expecting to make our bones on the defensive side of the ball. And I think people, when they look at our team very, very correctly and astutely, will point out that we're not a team necessarily made for pace and space by itself. We're going to have to let our defense generate a great deal of our offense. I think we have the kind of team that, because we have the sort of unselfish ball handlers we have, that with Steven Adams occupying and boxing out, and the guys we have that can fly to the ball and rebound and hit ahead and start our break, I think you'll see us be a lethal transition team. But all of that's going to start from the defensive side of the ball. And I think Coach Van Gundy and his staff are very committed to that. And it's certainly who he's been throughout his career. Now we've given that staff players that are capable of doing it. You know, in fairness to the staff last year, we didn't have a great deal of continuity. And the injury issue that we were dealing with made it almost impossible to practice on the defensive side of the ball. So once we got to the point where we were able to do that, I think you saw we had some upside there, and we feel like we've added quite a bit to the roster in that regard as well.
Hey, Griff, Doug Mouton at WWL Television here in beautiful downtown New Orleans. The decision to trade Jrue Holiday, would you call that a difficult decision? Was it about the value you were getting? Talk about your mindset with that.
Well, I think it was a difficult decision because Jrue is such a good human being. He's a good teammate, and he's such a class individual that you want that player representing your organization. I think we also recognize that Jrue's timeline might have been slightly different than ours, and building a sustainable future with all of the other assets we secured, in addition to Eric and Steven, made it possible for us to compete at the highest level we can now, but continue to add to the sustainability of our future. And that was really critical. We weren't at a point where we were one player away. We felt like we really needed to lay the groundwork for who we're going to be when we're a successful team. So trading Jrue enabled us to achieve that, and it enabled us to put him in a position where he's able to be more immediately competitive on his championship timeline. And that was meaningful to us. Jrue had earned that. So if we could move him into a position of that type, it was certainly part of our focus. And as is often the case with a player of his caliber, a player of Anthony Davis's caliber, when we traded Anthony, the best teams are the most interested in those players. So we were really grateful that we were able to put together the package we were, and it just dovetailed well for he and Lauren in terms of what they're trying to achieve as well.
Hey, Griff, Shamit here from Bourbon Street Shots. You guys are allowed to add up to 20 bodies for training camp. Are you guys continuing to add players as camp opens? And how is that going to look going forward in a season where COVID could potentially take away some of your depth? How do your bodies and depth look like in that situation?
Well, it'd be disingenuous to say I know the answer on the COVID front. It's going to be just something where everybody has to stay nimble and adaptable to the best of our ability. I know our coaching staff is of that mindset as well. We will not start with 20 in all likelihood. I think we'll be more in the range of 18 to start with. We may bring more people in as certain people pass through the protocols, but I don't think it's about the number for us, Shamit, as much as it's about having the right people here, and the staff is going to be able to adjust and pivot as necessary.
Hey, Griff, this is Ed Daniels at WGNO TV.
Yeah,
When you looked at the games last year, especially in the bubble, did that convince you that you needed more rim protection, or was that a conclusion, sir, that you arrived at earlier than that?
I think what the bubble experience highlighted for us more than anything else is just the overall leadership and the vocal presence from a leadership standpoint, the defensive identity that players bring to the game, and frankly, the overall competitiveness that we were bringing to the equation. It wasn't high enough. And I think what we wanted to do was sprinkle in as many elite competitors as we could. When we met Coach Van Gundy throughout the process, he used that term, elite competitors. And I think it was clear that we were lacking in that area to some degree. So we feel very, very confident that the players we've brought in address that. Certainly Coach addresses that on his front, but we really didn't have enough of a work ethic identity as a group. And so that's what stood out. And as it turns out, the rim protection is going to come along with that, but it's really about the urgency we were bringing and less about specific skill sets.
Will Guillory, go ahead.
Also, I know you talked about Steven quite a bit already, but just the decision to give him the extension, what went into that, knowing that you still haven't seen him with the team at all, and just the deal that you ended up giving him. Just walk us through the process of that.
Yeah, so it was important to us to get the extension done with Steven because, again, he represents culturally what we want to be about. He's a very young player, just 27 years of age, who's still playing very high level with the playoff background that he's had. We wanted him to bring that level of competitiveness to us and bring what he offers as a leader for more than just 1 year. And the way the rules work, if you do it as part of the trade, he can sign the 2-year extension. If we had not done it as part of the trade, he would have had to wait, or we would have had to wait until the end of February. And we really didn't want to take a chance that we got to that point. And he just decided that maybe what he wanted to do was test the free agent market. We would have had far more competition at that point. Once we could land the player we wanted and secure his services moving forward. And we recognized in talking to Steven how excited he was about what we were building. It was sort of a no-brainer to extend him in that circumstance.
Hello, I would like. My name is Christos. I'm from Greece. I would like to ask you. Last season, you played in the bubble. You were close to the playoffs. Do you feel that this season you can make a playoff spot?
We're certainly competing to be a playoff team. We're not going to limit what we're doing in any direction, but we absolutely want to compete at the highest levels. And we believe we've got a group that should be competing for a playoff position. At the same time, I would tell you, very much like last year, the number one goal for us is playing meaningful games. If we end up in a play-in tournament situation, that's fine. We just want to be hardened by winning. We want that to be the focus of what we're doing. And so we very much believe we have the makings of a playoff roster here. But we also recognize we've had incredible amounts of change, and Coach Van Gundy and his staff are going to have the shortest amount of turnaround in league history. So it's hard to build a real identity in the turnaround time we're going to have. So we want to be building towards something meaningful every day. But the results in the short term aren't what we're going to judge it on. It's going to be improvement and the mentality we bring to each day.
Thank you.
Griff, Christian Clark here one more time. When you guys hired Stan, you guys talked about the track record of defensive success. I think his teams have finished, top 10, 8 in his 12 years as a head coach. When you just think about a Stan Van Gundy defense, are there, common characteristics or through lines in the defenses he's coached that you can kind of point to?
Well, I think for one thing, defend the ball, defend your man. Stan's not somebody who historically has schemed a lot of help that can overcome the fact that if you don't keep your guy in front of you, we're going to get scored upon. And he builds a level of commitment and level of, accountability to the defensive side of the ball from day one of everything he's ever done that you can feel in his players. When we played his Detroit team, when I was in Cleveland, we swept them in the playoffs, and those 4 games were the hardest we played the entire time. And it was because literally every member of his team was bought in and was held accountable to keep your man in front. And when that's your prevailing ethos, when that's your mentality from the beginning, you start pretty far ahead of the curve. And so I would tell you, he instills that in people. Their personal accountability is going to be at a really high level. And we feel like we've added some of the right pieces from a player perspective as well. And that'll serve Coach Van Gundy and his staff well.
Scott Kushner again with Picayune. You mentioned positionless basketball a little bit when you mentioned Zion there. You obviously have a lot of guards on this roster. There's a lot of pretty good guards there. How do you envision getting all those guys in? And then with Eric Bledsoe now a part of this, how do you sort of see him collaborating with Lonzo? What does a starting backcourt kind of look like? Just generally your thoughts on that.
Well, I think for one, we envision being able to start Eric and Lonzo in much the same way that we started Lonzo and Jrue. Eric is a similar player to Jrue in many areas. I think in terms of the way he approaches the game, there's a little bit of a difference, but they're both very similar in their ability to create off the dribble and to defend. So we anticipate that those two can work very similar together to how Jrue and Lonzo worked. At the same time, because we have the versatility we do in the backcourt, we feel like all of those pieces work interchangeably with the others. Well, Nickeil can play with either one of those two and play very well, we feel. Kyra dovetails very well with Lonzo and Nickeil. So there's a lot of versatility there that excites us. In terms of how they all get on the court, I think Coach Van Gundy and his staff have their hands full to some degree that way. But these kids are all incredibly coachable, and they all just want to be part of winning. So I don't think they're going to have any difficulty with people being unhappy with their role. I just think the competitiveness of practice every day is going to be maybe an all-time high in my career.
Hey, David, it's Brett Martell with AP. Just one here on the fact that I guess going into year two for you, every player on the roster is someone that you've had a hand in acquiring, I believe. And I'm wondering how common that is in your experience to happen on that timeline and how that should be, I guess, interpreted by observers.
Well, I guess it's somewhat uncommon on the one hand. At the same time, we had two very high star level players that we traded that brought a great deal of the depth that we have. So it certainly wasn't a plan to completely turn over the roster. It just worked out that way in terms of how we reshaped the roster. But we had a pretty clear vision of what we wanted this to represent. Going back to the day we walked in the door and when Trajan joined up, we had that same vision, which was "Won't bow down" wasn't supposed to be a tagline. It's supposed to really be about who we are as a team. This place isn't meant for everybody, and we wanted our team to be one that left an impact on teams. We wanted it to be representative of the city itself. And so we set out to do that. And it just so happened that we ended up turning over the whole group. And I think Zion might have the most seniority right now, which cracks me up. But I think it's just happenstance. It wasn't intentional by any means.
Hey, Griff, it's Andrew from ESPN. You mentioned Zion. Obviously, by committing that extension to Steven Adams, you have a clear plan of those two being able to work together. How do you see Steven and Zion kind of fitting together over the next few years?
Andrew, I'm going to answer your question, but I'd like to point out the flex that Will Guillory is giving you on the shoe collection right now. I think you need to step to the table the next time with a view of your collection. I'm a little bit shaken by the fact that you're losing this battle in this fashion at this point.
That's because I keep mine in a closet like a normal human being. I don't have mine sitting behind me. So
this is going to be the best part ESPN runs. All of the clips on Twitter need to be you two going at it. That's what it needs to be.
That's the only reason to
ready.
Say it again, Will.
I'm ready whenever he's ready.
All right, man. Andrew, we very much believe Steven and Zion are going to work very well together. A big part of the reason is that because Steven is such an elite screen setter, he can do that on or off the ball. Zion can be used as a cutter away from the ball. He can be used as a ball handler. People, I think, unfairly look at him as a big and being limited to being a 4-5. When we drafted Zion, the thing that excited us the most was the positionless nature of his game. So we really very much envision a time where Zion's going to be playing the three and defending the three, and he's going to be on the handle, and Steven's going to be the one setting the screen. And Coach Van Gundy can address a lot of these things, but can you imagine a double screen set by Steven and Zion? And Zion rolls to the ball. Steven's actually going to be able to make decisions in a DHO and in dribble handoff situations. So we think they can work very seamlessly together. We had lineups with Zion and Derek Favors on the court last year that were among our best and most successful. And Steven can represent that same location on the court in terms of working from the dunker. So I think people put an awful lot of, and I'm one of them, quite frankly, put an awful lot of stock in the ability to stretch the court and shoot from the big position. Not enough is made of the ability to set a physical screen and to make the right read as a passer, and Steven gives us that.
Hey, Griff, Rod Walker with the Times-Picayune. Just going back to Zion again, what are the things that you want to see him make the biggest improvement on going into year 2 of his career?
Well, I think it's hard to really identify the things he needs to make the most improvement on other than his availability. I mean, we're going to need to keep him healthy and let him continue to grow as a player. Everything he did at a historically efficient level. And frankly, I would tell you that it's the things he enjoys the least on a basketball court. And he was historically good at it. So once he gets to the point where he's healthy enough to play his game, play with the ball more, play as a slasher and less of a post-up presence, I think you're going to see the real Zion come to the fore. And that's not a function of his improvement as much as it is a function of his opportunity to stay on the floor and be used in those interchangeable ways.
Great. Thank you very much, Griff. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started with Coach Van Gundy. Will Guillory, you can lead us off, please.
Hey, Coach, this is Will Guillory from The Athletic. Let me get my stuff going here. So one of the words I think Griff mentioned a while ago was that he wanted the transition attack to be lethal this year. And if you look back at most of your track record, a bunch of your teams have been bottom 10 or bottom half of the league in pace. So how much of an adjustment is that going to be for you coaching a team that wants to lean on playing fast more often?
A little bit of an adjustment, Will, but I have said this when I've been broadcasting. I think the pace stats are a little bit deceptive to begin with, because not in all cases, because certainly you had Milwaukee leading the league in defense and running off of it. But a lot of times, if you're hard to score against and you're making the offense, the other team's offense, take more time because you do a good job defensively, the pace of the game slows down, particularly if you're a defense that's good, but not based on creating turnovers, the pace will slow down. And so sometimes, I know even preparing for teams, you'll look at teams as what I think is a good running team, and then you look at the pace and fast break points, which are really pretty, I think, poorly defined anyway, and the numbers will be low. So I do think my teams have run better than the numbers will show, but it is different. I haven't had, I really haven't had guys that could attack in transition the way that, say, Eric Bledsoe can. I haven't had guys, I don't think anybody has guys who throw the ball ahead as well and as willingly as Lonzo does. And so we've got some advantages in transition and certainly want to play to that. And that will require some adjustment for me in the way that we play offensively. But I think the biggest thing is to make our transition game as good as it can be. And I just mentioned Milwaukee. We got a guard. I mean, I don't know if you can be 20th defensively and be a lethal transition team. You just don't get enough opportunities to get out and run. And you can push the ball when the other team scores. And we will try to play faster off of those situations than I am used to. But I don't think you're going to, light the world on fire in transition if you're taking the ball out of the net all the time.
Coach, this is Fletcher Mackel from WDSU NBC New Orleans. I have, I guess, kind of two questions here. You said that you were happy to stay away from the managerial side because you believed in Griff, but as somebody who covered games, I guess maybe your level of excitement when Adams and Bledsoe became official. And then more importantly, as far as Zion and his health, are there any limitations going into training camp that you've been told of, or will he be full go to the best of your knowledge, in shape and, 100%?
Yeah, thanks, Fletcher. To your first question, I've always been a big fan of Eric Bledsoe's. I think first and foremost, he has the kind of disposition and mentality that I really like. I mean, he's a tough, hard playing guy who will really compete on the defensive end and on the offensive end. He's a relentless attacker. I mean, he's somebody who can attack off the dribble. He's a great finisher. Somebody who can really, really get to the paint. And obviously, he's now spent the last couple of years playing on the team, that's had the best record in the NBA. And so he understands what it is to play at that level. So I thought he was a great addition. And to be able to go in the same trade and get Steven Adams, I mean, that to me is an amazing job that Griff pulled off to be able to do that. And then add a couple of first round picks and some swaps. I mean, you couldn't do a much better job than that, but those two new guys will really help. As far as Zion, no one, not Zion, not our medical staff has mentioned any limitations going into camp. As far as the conditioning and where it is, it's not just Zion, it's everybody on the team. I won't have any idea on that really until Sunday, when we get into the first day of team practice and start going up and down the floor a little bit. We'll start to get an idea of where we are. I will just say this. I don't think it's going to be the level of conditioning I'm used to seeing on the first day of training camp. And I don't think that's of any fault of the players. I think this virus and what the players have been allowed to do and not allowed to do is going to have major impact. Normally, as you guys know, you go to that first day of training camp, they've usually been around for 3 or 4 weeks and playing pickup games and getting up and down the floor. We couldn't do any of that. And so you just have to know as a coach that you're going to go into it on Sunday and it's not going to be the level of conditioning that you're used to dealing with. And one of our big jobs in training camp over the course of a little over 2 weeks is to bring them as far as we possibly can in that amount of time. And I think for us, that means a real orientation in camp to a lot of 5-on-5 play, a lot less breakdown drilling, working on the parts of things, and a lot more of whole method of getting everybody out there and going at it and playing basketball. I don't think there's a better way to condition than to play. And so we have to play as much as we possibly can and add things as we go.
Hey, Stan, Christian Clark with NOLA.com here. The Steven Adams extension, I mean, he'll be here for the next few years with that thing done. I mean, your power forward and center for years to come are Zion and Steven Adams. What are just your thoughts on, that pairing and how those guys can kind of mesh together, how you envision them playing together?
Well, look, I think first of all, find me a 4 and 5 together anywhere in the league that's as physical as those two guys. I was when we made that trade, I said, look, the one thing I know for sure, you may come in here and shoot the ball great. You might find a way to beat us. You're not punking the New Orleans Pelicans ever with those two guys next to each other. So we got 2 really physical guys, 2 really strong guys, 2 elite offensive rebounders. We got guys that are capable of being great screeners. They are both high-level finishers around the basket in a different way. Zion obviously finishes at the rim and over the top of people, top 3 in the league in finishing at the rim. Steven, is a really interesting guy, as you guys know, because you've seen him so much. He's this big, strong guy, and he's got that really soft touch in the lane. Like he gets the ball in a pocket pass and puts up that little floater. It's pretty interesting to watch. So, on the interior at both ends of the floor and on both boards, we should be very, very good. And then I think they're both very capable passers, and they're going to have to be as interior passers because, we're going to be a little bit different than almost everybody else in the league in that we'll spend a good part of the game playing with 2 guys who are not stretch. Neither one of them are stretch shooters. I like it in this sense, Christian. The thing I like is I like being different than other teams. Okay. I think it takes maybe a little bit longer to develop. It'll take them some time because everybody's sort of used to playing in a different alignment. But I think it's good that when you come play the New Orleans Pelicans, the game's going to be different than the game you play every other night of the week. I think it makes it more of a challenge for people to play us. I think that can turn into an advantage for us.
Stan, Scott Kushner from the Times-Picayune. You mentioned not getting punked there. Griff mentioned the words ferocious competitor a couple times with guys that you've added. How much of the philosophy of this team and what you're building right now is really based on toughness and competitiveness and all this kind of stuff that in a league that's so based on 3-point shooting, it feels like most of the time that you are kind of zigging where others zag. Is that a fair way to put it?
Well, listen, I think that every coach will tell you that they value competitiveness, but it's all a matter of how you prioritize things, right? And I think that what Griff's done in building this roster is he's prioritized that toughness and competitiveness above other things. I mean, we all, what you want is toughness, competitiveness, a very high skill level, a lot of shooting, quickness, speed, guys that can guard multiple positions, handlers, passers. They don't come all rolled up in one guy, and your team will take on an identity of its own. And I think all of us here want our identity to be largely about toughness and competitiveness. And I think that certainly the additions of Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams, add to that. And that's what we hope to be. And with those two guys up front, like I said, I mean, physicality is not going to be the problem up front with those two in the game.
Hello, Coach. Chris Sales from SDNA.gr, Greece. I would like to ask you, you have a player that you collaborate with him on 10 years before, JJ Redick. How important for your plan on New Orleans Pelicans is his presence in the roster? And how excited you are with these young guys like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, and Kara Lewis on your roster? How excited you are to evaluate and to make a step up about their performances?
Well, I think the first part of your question, obviously the only player I come in really knowing and having a great familiarity with is JJ, and certainly his game has changed over the last 8 years that I haven't been coaching him. But I know what his work ethic is. I know what his level of focus is. I know what his competitiveness is. I know who I'm coaching, even as he's gotten older. And certainly, I think, if you look at how the New Orleans Pelicans in this upcoming season are going to build an offense, certainly Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson are your two foundational building blocks. But I think the other two guys offensively who you're really building around, and everybody has a role, but the other two guys you're really building around and running plays for, let's put it this way, is you're building your offense around Eric Bledsoe and JJ Redick and his catch and shoot ability. Now, we're also largely building an offense around Lonzo Ball and his ability in transition to get people the ball and give us a chance to attack, and his ability to shoot the ball on the perimeter. But in the half court, in terms of who you're going to run plays for, it's going to be Brandon, Zion, Eric, and JJ. So I don't think that's going to surprise anybody, in the league, our fan base, our players, or anybody else. So JJ's a huge part of it. He's a guy who draws, besides his ability to make shots, because of that, his being able to draw attention and everything else opens up other people, creates great space on the floor. And he's a guy who's always going to be tuned into what's going on. He's a low mistake guy at both ends of the floor, but particularly defensively. I've always had great appreciation for what JJ brings to the game at the defensive end of the floor. As far as the young guys, I mean, I don't know how you could be any more excited than I am. I mean, Brandon and Zion, you've got two guys who are, foundational building blocks of a franchise that are really young and have the potential at least to be together and do great things for a long time. And I'm really excited about, going into camp and really learning more about them. I mean, because you start with an outsider's knowledge, even when you get into the film. I mean, you're starting with an outsider's knowledge of what you think these guys can do and what you can build for them and everything else. But it's my experience, you don't really know until you get in there and start coaching them. And there's some things that I know they can do based on what I've seen on film. and we want to keep those things, obviously. And then there's some things that you think you can build in for them that might be a little bit different, but you're not going to know that until you get out there and do it. And we're going to have to figure that out as we go. I'd be lying to all of you and to my team if I told you that sitting here right now, or even 5 days into training camp, that I know exactly where we're going to go and what's going to go on. I mean, I'm coaching these guys for the first time, and they're young guys. It's you have to understand it's different if you take over a team and everybody's like JJ Redick. I know exactly the kind of stuff I want to run for JJ Redick, and so would any other coach coming in here, because you've seen the guy do it over 14 years in the league. With these younger guys, it's a little bit of a process, but it's also one of the things that really excites me is, trying to find new things, trying to build things into your offense that allows guys to show maybe skills that we haven't seen to this point.
Hey, Coach, it's Andrew from ESPN. You mentioned it a little bit right there, but just what kind of player do you see Lonzo Ball as, especially after his growth last year as a shooter? You guys obviously bringing Bledsoe in to kind of help in the half court with the offense. Where do you kind of see Lonzo being able to grow?
Well, I think Lonzo's got some things that he does at an extremely high level. There's no one in the league that throws the ball ahead to people in transition the way Lonzo does. No one who sees it any better, nobody who's as willing to deliver the ball up the floor as quickly as he does. And so if you're willing to run, if you're willing to be a guy who gets down the floor, you're going to get a lot of chances to attack because of that ability that Lonzo has. Then in the half court, what he did last year, shooting the ball, both the percentage he shot from three at just under 38% and on a high volume gives us great spacing on the floor for our other guys. So he helps in that regard. He's a guy that I want to try to put into some different situations. But I think the thing that we really want to, focus on improvement with him in terms of playing the game is, being a little bit more aggressive on pick and rolls in particular, to turn the corner and go to the basket to score. I think he can be a better finisher, turning the corner on his drives. And I think it's a mindset. He's so such a great passer that I think there's times he's coming off looking to pass, and then what opens up is the basket. And my experience is that it's hard to adjust from the pass to the shot. Whereas if you're thinking score and the help comes, a guy with Lonzo's instincts will see the play. So we just sort of need to turn that around with him. But his passing ability, his ability in transition, and his three-point shooting alone make him a very, very good player. And I think, we've got a lot of guys who are playmakers now. And I think playing multiple playmakers together is a good thing in today's game, particularly the amount of switching you see and everything else. Your ability to break people down off the dribble and make plays is absolutely essential. And I think having more of those guys gives you an advantage.
Hey, Coach, Shamit Dua from Bourbon Street Shots. Zion Williamson and Steven Adams are two of the best offensive rebounders in the league. Obviously, you want to play to your strengths. How do you balance that with getting back in transition for transition defense?
That's a great question, and it's been one of the things that we've talked about as a staff, because I have always highly valued transition defense. I just think it's something that if you're willing to focus and make the effort, that it's not really personnel based, that you can be a good defensive transition team. I've never had two guys playing next to each other who were both that good of offensive rebounders. And then we've got guys like Josh Hart, and even Lonzo as a point guard, who are pretty capable offensive rebounders. And I think one of the things that we have to monitor as the year goes on is, as we give guys a little bit more freedom to attack the glass, are we getting more than we're giving up? I mean, it's a pretty easy, thing to track. And, we have to see how that goes. I do think it's essential that the guys who are not offensive rebounders are back quickly right on the release of the shot. I think our effort in transition is going to be huge no matter what we do on the offensive glass. And then I think understanding what we're trying to accomplish in transition is a big one. And it is something that we will spend a lot of time on daily, is our transition defense. So while our offensive rebounding rules may be in flux a little bit, as we go into the season, our philosophy in transition and our, the time we put into it will not be in flux. It's something we will emphasize starting on Sunday. Honestly, that it'll be the very first thing we go on the court and talk about is transition defense. Right from our offensive rebounding rules to getting back will be the very first thing we address basketball wise when we start practice on Sunday.
Yeah, hey, Stan, Doug Mouton at WWL TV here in the beautiful French Quarter of New Orleans. When talking about Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams, Griff used, highly competitive often. You did too. Is part of what you hope to get from them is to maybe teach the young core how to play in the fourth quarter and how to finish? Is that a part of bringing in two guys like them?
Well, I think it certainly helps. But, let's be clear. And I think the number one way that veteran players teach other players is by what they do on the court. Our players will see those two guys practice every day, prepare every day, play in games, play in the fourth quarter. There's no better lesson than that. I'm sure those guys will, talk to our other guys, talk to our young guys and help them in that way. I certainly hope they do, but nothing will be as powerful as how they play in those situations. That's how players will really learn. They'll see it and see, Eric Bledsoe pressuring the ball and getting over screens and things like that, and Steven Adams protecting the rim and rebounding the ball. And they'll know that those are the things that lead to winning basketball. Look, those two guys in JJ are the only three guys on our team who, or at least of our core guys in the rotation, who've been in the playoffs. So they have to lead the way. There's no question on that.
What's up, Stan? This is Will Guillory from The Athletic again. Just about every time we've talked to you, you've stressed the importance of defense and making a commitment on that end. And I know you've probably watched a ton of film on last year's team. So what specific areas do you feel like you want to see some improvement for that jump to happen this year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would identify three right off the bat, Will. Number one, we just talked about, we got to get back. We can't be giving up easy buckets in transition. Number two is I'm going to give you four, actually. Number two is we've got to keep the ball out of the paint. I think we've really got to commit ourselves to keeping the ball out of the paint. We gave up 52 points a game in the paint last year. I don't think that you can build a sustainable defense around that. So, we have to be able to take care of that. What sort of goes along with that and helps is we've got to cut our fouls. We gave up almost 25 free throw attempts a game last year too. So if you're giving up 52 in the paint and you're giving up 25 free throw attempts, it gets really, really difficult, no matter what else you do and no matter how hard you can. And then the fourth one is we got to be a better defensive rebounding team. So we were a really good offensive rebounding team that got a lot of second chance points, and a really poor defensive rebounding team that gave up a lot of second chance points. So if we could do those four things, get back, really commit to keeping the ball out of the paint, cut down on our fouls, and block out and rebound a lot better as a team, I'd be pretty happy.
All right, great. That's going to be it. Thanks a lot, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Will. Thanks, Will.